Operation Truth. The show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. This is Operation Truth. My name is Lou Palumbo. My co-host is Tom Fuentes. As I mentioned in the last episode, we had to end the episode, but we didn't end the conversation about the Ukraine, and we're going to get right back into that. But I just want to mention a couple of things very briefly. You know, guys, we can fix our borders. We can. We can correct the crime in our cities. We can adjust our foreign policies. You know, we can adjust the energy sector discussion. We can even go after the economy. Some of these are heavier lifts than others. We still haven't talked about the homeless, the mentally ill, our veterans living on the street, our children, our elderly. There's a myriad of discussions that need to take place here. What perhaps all of us find so interesting is that we seem to be able to take care of people other than our own. I will say, whoever becomes the next president in 2024 needs to figure out what the conversation will be that will heal this country. And my concern is that both sides of this discussion right now, whether it be Donald Trump or a Joe Biden or a Gavin Newsom or whomever the Democrats are thinking of running, are just going to further this divide. We've got to put the sword down and go forward. Taking a quick break. And as I promised you, we ended this last episode on this Ukraine because it's a highly relevant discussion today. We're living it day to day. We just came out of a 20-year war in the Middle East as a byproduct of ill-conceived foreign policies. I want to get into that discussion with Tom. I also want to ask him, as I mentioned at the end of the last episode, this concept of proxy war. Stay with me. We'll be right back, guys.
Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
Back, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to bring on Tom Fuentes, a former assistant director of the FBI, with extensive knowledge of geopolitical issues. I mean, you have to know what Tom did in the Bureau Number 1. He was in charge of the international operation for the FBI, which, if I am correct in my recollection, having learned from Tom, that included 80 field offices, including some in adversarial nations like Russia, Moscow. So, Tom, we ended this conversation, and I threw out this concept of proxy war. I'd like you to pick up the conversation and give us a little further insight as to what's transpiring in the Ukraine, and what are we looking at going forward? I mean, are we looking at another 20-year war? Is this our proxy war with Russia? Give us the backdrop here, Tom.
Well, Lou, I don't think it's going to be a 20-year war because our adversary is different. You know, for the entire Cold War, almost every war we have fought in has involved a very much weaker military. Iraq was probably the strongest of all of them. I think at the time of the Iraq War, they had the third or fourth largest military in the world. But what they didn't have is the aerial assets. We controlled the skies, and that prevented that military from really doing the kind of damage that they might have done in a more conventional ground war. But we've had the idea since the end of World War II that we are invincible. We are the strongest, mightiest, with good on our side, military in the world. And therefore, we can impose our will on the rest of the world to adopt our democratically elected government and do it our way because we know best and we have the strongest economy, we have the strongest culture. All of those factors, which to a large extent were true in 1945, they've gradually eroded since. And we don't have the mightiest military where it could impose our will easily on the rest of the world. And you just heard an example of that in the last 2 weeks, that where Kirby, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, followed by Joe Biden, admitted that we have given so much to Ukraine, we've run out of artillery shells. We're going to have to send cluster bombs. Now, cluster bombs are basically like canister cannon fire in Civil War. The 155 millimeter artillery shell goes up, opens up and drops all of these little bomblets, baseball-sized bombs. And the idea is if you have troops running around on the ground, this rains down on them and kills them. If they're not in a tank, if they're not protected, they die. Now, most of the world has banned this weapon, cluster bombs, and we learned valuable lessons to never use them again in Iraq, because I was in Iraq. I was the FBI's first commander there in 2003, right after mission accomplished and we won. And what happened is that we were dropping these bomblets all over. And while I was there, little kids were picking them up in the fields and they were exploding. Now, on one occasion, I'm going to digress a little bit to show you from a personal standpoint. The palace that me and my fellow FBI agents and technicians were working out of was right next door to another little palace that the military turned into a MASH unit, a hospital unit. And it was staffed by some of the greatest doctors in the country who were from emergency room trauma centers all over. And basically, if they wanted to call home, they had to go to the base and get in line for 2 hours, get 5 minutes on the phone and hang up. We happened, with our technology, that we had access through satellite coverage. We could phone back for free, back into the United States, any number. And I met with the head of that medical unit. And I said, by the way, you and your fellow doctors and nurses, feel free to come next door to our place and use our phones and our computers anytime you want. You have full access to use them. So one day, and we got to be friends, one day the head of that medical unit, these are seasoned trauma doctors. This guy was from Houston. They saw gunshots every day, stabbings, people blown up, killed, car accidents. He comes into our little building there and he's crying like a baby. And he goes to borrow one of our phones. He's calling home to talk to his wife, uncontrollably crying. Then after the call, he and I talk a little bit. What happened was that a boy and a girl, about 10 years old, were out in the field, not too far away. We were right next to Baghdad airport. So they're out in that field, and the girl picked up one of these bomblets, and it just exploded and severely injured her. She was brought into their trauma center. They worked on her for over 6 hours, and she died. And he was, as I said, crying like a baby because this young girl could not be saved. That's what these little cluster bombs do to kids, to private civilians when they rain down in the field. And they estimate that out of 100%, 10 or 20% don't explode, but they're still live. They're not duds. They just didn't go off at that time. So now we've run out of ammunition because we've given so much to Ukraine. And even though most of the world has banned the use of that weapon, we've decided, well, we're going to clean out our closet and send cluster bombs into Ukraine, and they're already using them. I was watching a news broadcast a couple of days ago where a reporter had gotten killed by one of those in the eastern part of Ukraine. So that's what we're talking about now. The type of things that we're doing or allowing are, to me, unconscionable.
Tom, I want to ask you about Zelensky, if I may. We're concerned about censorship. Are we having a little issue with him in the Ukraine in this censorship and how he's managing people that appear to be adversarial to him? What's going on with him? Which is a bit of irony here.
Well, Lou, the irony is, if you remember when Russia first went into Ukraine, February 22, Zelensky, he was being heralded by members of our own Congress. He's the George Washington of the Ukraine. He's fantastic. What a hero. He's our hero. We've got to give him everything we can possibly give him. And here's a guy who, this should sound familiar, his main political opponent, when he takes power, he locks up, puts him in jail, and his opposition party still in jail. And Ukraine is a Christian Orthodox population, as is Russia, by the way. Religion was banned by the Soviet Union, but they've been out since 1992. The country itself is basically Christian Orthodox, as is Putin himself. So, but anyway, Zelensky, the great protector of religious freedom, he bans the church. He's locked up priests and nuns in the Ukraine. So here's a guy locks up his opposition party. He's closed down newspapers and TV and radio stations. He's locked up members of the clergy. But oh no, he's George Washington. He's the greatest guy ever on the planet. So that's the story with Zelensky. He's basically, interestingly, Zelensky was getting ready to negotiate with Putin before the invasion, before Putin drove his tanks into the country, and he gets a visit from Boris Johnson from the UK, speaking for EU countries, NATO countries, and Joe Biden, that you will not negotiate. You will fight the Russians. We will help you to the end. We'll give you everything you could possibly need to defeat Russia, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to go to war against Russia on our behalf.
And that's the proxy war.
That's the proxy war. And by the way, the proxy, to tell you how much of a proxy it is, in the United States, in 10 years, lost 58,000 military soldiers and sailors, airmen in Vietnam. It's estimated by a number of different experts at the Pentagon and elsewhere that Ukraine has had over 350,000 soldiers killed and another couple 100,000 wounded, to where they'll never go back to the battlefield. They're severely wounded. So that's why now, what's going on right now in the Ukraine, the units that are closest to the Russians, when they get shelled, in the exchange of gunfire with the Russians, and their soldiers get wounded, Ukrainian officials, captains and generals and so forth in the field, are contacting the Russians across the battlefield and saying, our country won't come and take our wounded. They won't help us in any way. Can we come to you? Can we surrender and be assured protection and medical care? And Russia, from the beginning, has had a policy: any wounded Ukrainian, or even not wounded, any captured Ukrainian will be treated properly. There will be no abuse, torture, mistreatment of any kind, because they're our brother Slavs, and we're going to live with them in the future when we have peace again. And so you have Ukrainian units right now surrendering to the Russians, knowing they'll get proper medical care and treatment.
You know what's interesting about this conversation, Tom, and there's a consistency, and you pointed it out post-World War II, it's the convoluted nature of our foreign policies and our involvements in foreign nations. Attached to this conversation, Tom, is another very serious conversation regarding the potential compromise of the office of the President of the United States. There's an expression they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's hearings going on today with someone who is a partner of Hunter Biden's. I mean, this whole discussion with Hunter Biden is this whole separate episode, because it is so disturbing what went on with this young man. I say this, and I want to say it in context. You and I have both had a tremendous amount of responsibility in our lives. There's no greater responsibility than your children. They reflect directly on you. I don't know what happened to Hunter, Joe. I don't know what you were doing that you lost track of what he was doing. I know how I parent my children. I breathe every breath that they take every day. Nothing is going to get by me, because I lived a big life. I happened to have watched this documentary on Studio 54. I knew Steve Rubell and I knew Ira Schrager. Not like we were best of friends, but I knew him, and I won't tell you what the relationship was. It's not really that important. But, the bottom line is, I learned a lot through my own social life. I know where the pitfalls are. I know drug abuse. I know alcohol abuse. I've seen people die before their time because of alcohol and drug abuse. You and I have seen a whole lot. What happened here, Joe, with Hunter? Just for the record, I don't know what happened with this kid, but continuing to enable him is not helping things, number one. Number two, this two-tier system of justice is quite disturbing. I heard something today, Tom, I don't know if it's confirmed, but I'm understanding that during this administration, they prosecuted over 4,000 gun-related violations, various forms. And the only one that got some type of consideration that was given to it was Hunter Biden's. I don't know how much we're prepared in destroying the country and dividing the country and polarizing the country. Sometimes you got to step up and take your medicine. This thing about lack of accountability. And you know what, Tom? Lack of accountability in our foreign policies. What I want to do, guys, I need to go to a break, and I want to continue this conversation about foreign policies with this country in a very general sense, because in discussing the Ukraine and discussing Vietnam and we haven't even talked about the withdrawal, Tom, from Afghanistan. All of these are critical elements that define our nation. And know this, the eyes of the world are on us. And what I don't like is that we talk out of two sides of our mouth. That's the part that really bothers me. I lived in the streets. I grew up in the streets. I was a rough kid. I was born in Brooklyn. I told everybody, and not shamefully, we were the only white family on the block. My parents didn't have two nickels to rub together, nor did they have time to hate somebody because of their ethnicity, their religious domination, their culture. They didn't have time. Make you laugh further, my mother was a Southerner. You thought she would have had a little hate in her heart. She sure didn't. But I learned a lot from that part of this journey. I know adversity. I know failed foreign policies also, and they just resonate. And I think Tom hit the nail on the head, speaking about post-World War II, what ensued after that. So I want to take a break. I want to come back. I want to give Tom some final comments on today, and then we're going to segue you guys, give you some food for thought as to what the next episode is going to be. So stay with us. You're listening to Operation Truth. Please become part of this conversation, but please remember it includes civility and decency and respect. All of these concepts are terms that have left our conversation today. It's shameful what's going on in our country. We are better than this, and we can fix this. Stay with us. We'll be right back, guys.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm bringing back on Tom Fuentes, my co-host, who's brilliant in his own right. I want to say it to you that way. There's another gentleman that Tom has mentioned. I believe his name is Chris Schwecker. Is that?
Yeah.
I think this guy's pretty spot on. So I'd like to get him on at some point in time and just get your brains going at the same time. I'm sure it'd be quite interesting. But we're in a discussion about the Ukraine, and I'm starting to throw concepts out to you about convoluted foreign policies. And Tom brought up the fact that post-World War II, we started to get into some rather, I would say, questionable foreign policies. But I want you to continue on this Ukraine discussion right now, Tom. We're probably going to have to wrap the show on it today, but guys, there'll be a continuation on this in the next episode because this topic isn't finished yet. But we do have to talk about Afghanistan and that withdrawal at some point. But Tom, I want to yield the floor back to you, sir, regarding the Ukraine.
Okay, Lou, first of all, if I could mention, Chris Swecker was an assistant director back in the FBI when I was, along with Terry Turchi, Kevin Brock, several others in our generation of executives. And because of the FBI's mandatory retirement, age 57, we all had to retire in the 2008 to 2010 or 11 timeframe. Now, I've heard Chris and others, Chris is a good friend of mine, I've heard others in that group on other networks on cable news talking about the demise of the FBI in the last 5-6 years, the politicization, the two standards and all of that none of that existed when we were in the Bureau. And I retired 15 years ago, as I said, mandatory. So when we get them on as guests, which would be great, we might want to get into that topic. What happened to the FBI? Because that's also timely. You have people calling for defunding, dismantlement of the FBI right now.
And I agree 100% with you, Tom. But you know what I really want to talk about? Not just going into the history of how you unraveled, but the road back, because that's what's lacking in the conversation today. A lot of people are critical of the FBI. I got it. The upper management, and I mean less than a handful of them, have destabilized, or how would you say, harm the credibility of the FBI. The question is, how do we get it back intact? And I know that you're one of the people that could do that. Chris is probably one as well. We need to reinstill the honor and the integrity and the trustworthiness that this agency held above all other agencies. So let's continue with this conversation, Tom, with the Ukraine, because you and I know we could talk about a myriad of topics all day long, and we need a hell of a lot more than an hour. But let's finish with this Ukraine discussion for now, Tom.
Okay. In Ukraine, you have the evidence of what political corruption can do, or the negative result it can be. And we now see every day these hearings, the meetings, the documents that are being collected by the House committees, informant information from the FBI, that these are different sources of information, not one person or one group that's trying to go after Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. These are different sources that say they took in millions. My good friend Peter Schweitzer, who has written about the corruption going back to the Clinton cash book, going back to other officials and Biden and others, and the money they took, he documented $31 million to the Bidens from China, Communist Party of China. Now you've got documentation through the FBI source that Joe Biden initially $5 million, Hunter Biden $5 million, and that the House committee estimates that could go as high as $50 million. So when you have that kind of money, let's say coming specifically from the Ukraine, and now later you're president of the United States and Ukraine says, we want money, we want equipment, we want guns, and we'll do what you tell us to do as far as fighting Russia. So our government has sent millions to Ukraine with little or no accountability on the part of the Ukrainians, other than Zelensky and several other high officials have luxury homes that they've had built on the shore in Miami, on the shore of the Atlantic, in the Black Sea, in Venice, Italy, you name it. They have gotten extremely rich from us. And they're supposed to be busy fighting the war against Russia on our behalf.
I got a question for you, Tom, if I may. Define the relationship between Zelensky and the Bidens for the listener.
Well, I think that, as I said, he's in the position to benefit from the already extensive amount of money that Ukrainian officials and oligarchs and the head of Burisma had sent to the Bidens already. So, now Biden becomes president, and they decide, okay, we're going to get the Ukraine to do what we want, which is attack Russia. Now, part of the problem, we talk about foreign policy, to go to, to divert a second. Part of the foreign policy problem the United States has is that we have complete idiots running our State Department, running the Pentagon, running, official policy of the government, much less the president and his immediate advisors, who still think, we are the mightiest, most powerful military and government on the world. We can do whatever we want. And now we hear, after a little over a year and a half in Ukraine, we're out of ammunition. We're running out of equipment, some of the stuff that we're supposed to have. And unlike World War II, where it could be replaced on a continuing basis, we're being told by our own military industrial complex that some of these munitions, like the 150 millimeter howitzer artillery shell, could take 5-6 years to replenish. These factories are not in a position to go on 24/7 production like they did in World War II.
Is that because nobody's working in the country today, Tom?
No, it's because they changed their assembly lines because they didn't think we'd need it again. They thought, we're so mighty, who would challenge us? We wouldn't need all this equipment.
Again, this word convoluted seems to pop up every time we have a conversation regarding a policy, whether it's domestic or foreign, and you and I are not even talking about what's going on domestically in this country. We haven't spoken about our borders. We haven't spoken about the crime in the city. We haven't spoken about the fact that your gasoline, I was paying $1.77 a gallon at a Sunoco station in New York in January of 2021. And it's over $2 more a gallon right now. I just drove by one of the pumps. It's $3.89. And on the West Coast, it's almost $6 a gallon. We haven't talked about that, Tom. We talk a lot about foreign policies, which there's a clear relevance to the agenda and competence and leadership of this country. And, I hope we can get this genie back in the bottle. Tom, I constantly remind people of something. The population of this country since you and I were born, Tom is ironically one day older than I am, both born in 1951. Since our birth, it's increased over 200 million. And when things increase or get larger, exponentially, problems grow with it. I'm wondering if we're hitting a point where we can't manage the number of people in the country that we have. Although we seem to be, I would say, less than hesitant in letting people cross our border in the millions. And guys, I want to tell you something else, not to go off on a tangent, but they identified 5.5 million people cross the southern border. Where's the conversation about those individuals who overstay their visas, which is normally the larger number of people that are in the country illegal? And what about the conversation with our northern borders? What is this deceptive practice of government? And by the way, I wish that I don't want to say opposing political mechanism like the Republicans would speak to this, but I think that they should speak to this also. At some point in time, Tom, we'll one day hopefully get off this whole what's going on in the world routine and start to talk about some other domestic issues here. I love this conversation about gun control, which all of a sudden we haven't heard much about since the very, leader of the conversation, the president's son, violated a federal gun law that is a felony, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, and has a 10-year jail sentence attached to it. He got a diversion. I got it. The only one out of over 4,000 cases that were prosecuted under this administration for gun-related incidents. We can talk and talk and talk about this, Tom. I think for today, I think we should wrap it. You and I, again, will collude and where we're going to go in the next conversation. But guys, I'm going to tell you going in, you're going to start to hear discussions about our foreign policy in Afghanistan and the billions of dollars that we left there in assets and the air base that was strategic in nature. In my opinion, and Tom will be able to chime in, I've already heard military officials say it. I mean, I'm not the brightest guy on the planet, but I didn't fall off the back of the Apple truck either. Bagram was a critically strategic positioning in the Middle East, period. And I also hear if we'd left 2,500 troops, we could have kept, I guess, that country somewhat in check as opposed to what it's evolved into again, post-withdrawal. But I want to give you the final comment for today, Tom, before we wrap, sir.
Lou, I go back to something you said about the size of the country doubling since the President Kennedy time, early 60s. The difference, I think, is this massive illegal immigration means that people are coming in that are not assimilated. They're not coming in and becoming American. So we could manage the growth that we had from 1963 to the present, where we have 350, 360 million people, because it was a gradual, as they came in, they moved into communities, learned English, learned our culture, learned our ways, and became cohesive. When you hear the stories, for instance, World War II, all of these military units, all the different ethnic backgrounds of the soldiers in the same units, and they got along, they worked together, they learned together, they learned respect for each other, and those soldiers became Americans. Even more recently, here, I live in Virginia now, and the Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, from Jamaica originally, joined the military in the United States so she could become an American citizen. So she wanted to adopt the American culture, become an American. But now when you see these massive thousands of people coming in, they're not coming in to learn how to be Americans. Many of them are coming in to tell you how to be whatever, Lebanese or African or something. So instead of they want to do a reverse assimilation, change the United States into their philosophy, their beliefs. So that's the problem that we've had, is that this rush of 5-10 million people in the last 2 years, 3 years under Biden, they're not all coming in to be Americans. And many of them are doing tremendous damage in the communities they're going into. So that even Democratic leaders are saying, wait a minute, enough's enough, like the mayor of New York. Suddenly, all of
Absolutely.
these sanctuary cities are deciding that their policies were pretty stupid in the first place.
You know what I say, Tom? There's that expression. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but you know, Tom, you're spot on. And ironically, this failure to assimilate has been something that's been attached to our history. I mean, if you really, I don't want to go off on a tangent about this, but if you looked at slavery, we emancipated the slave, but we didn't assimilate them into the mainstream of America. We compartmentalized them the same way we did the indigenous people. I got the mistakes we made, Tom, but you know, my brain just wants to fix things. I have to be honest with you. But the value in talking about these things is to recognize what those mistakes were, learn from them, and forge forward. I always say, and I don't say it kiddingly, I don't understand why people come from these countries where they were oppressed or subjected to injustice to behave the same way here they did in their country. Why don't you just stay where you are? If you want to become part of this, you have to willingly do that. But there's another part of this conversation, Tom. It's incumbent upon the leadership, starting with the President of the United States, to have this discussion about assimilation. It trickles down into the governors and into the cities in each state. We're having no conversation about it. We're once again, this word remiss, or as I like this word, pandering, because we seem to have mastered the art of pandering in this country with our minorities, with our women, with the migrant situation. And Tom, so everybody understands, we're not anti-immigrant. We need a migration process to further the growth and stability of this country in many ways, including economically. But the litmus test for getting into the United States can't be swimming the Rio Grande, because Tom and I, by the way, we want to let you guys know, we're going to Mexico. We're going to start giving swim lessons, selling boogie boards and surfboards. It's going to be a killer industry, you know, because we get people across the border safely. It's not funny, guys, what's going on here today. But I say this to you, not to influence your political decision, but this is very simple. You understand who's driving this, and I don't understand it, but it's the Democrats. And I'm not anti-Democrat. My favorite all-time president was John Kennedy, regardless of the reason why. And I loved Robert Kennedy also. These were men that had vision and understanding that grew into these positions. And I don't want to hear about their personal lives because I don't care about their personal lives, just like I don't care about anybody's personal life. And I remind you to guard your privacy. Stop putting your business and who you sleep with on the street. But independent of that, guys, we need to start to address, speak to, fix these problems. And we can do that. And that's what this show is about. We're not here to be contentious or accusatory or to exclude anyone. I want everybody in this country to find some peace and calm and happiness in your life. Guys, this isn't a dress rehearsal. So you're out here banging your heads against the wall 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Ask yourself what it gets you. And you're talking to someone who was very contentious at one point of my life. And I tell you something, I'm hellbound by the truth. I don't care about anything other than that. I stare at it every day, even when it stares back at me unfavorably. It's just how God built me. Thank God. Because it's a very simple way to live. Tom, I want to thank you for today, for making, you know, this show as great as it is, you know, and a lot of it has to do with you because, you know, we have, we're a day apart in birth, and we had interesting parallels in our lives. And then my life kind of went in a rather interesting direction as yours did. And, you know, the amount of information and knowledge and insight that you've accumulated as I have, just a slight bit different. Like I'm really plugged into how to fix this country in its immediacy. You know, we just need to give the young people here a shot, guys, and we owe them an explanation. And I keep asking Brian Williams to create a forum for us to start to speak to the young people, because whether we like this or not, we owe them an explanation as to why there's nothing that they believe in. They don't believe in their government. They don't trust them. They don't trust the media. We've destroyed the credibility of the FBI and policing. We subverted the judicial process by weaponizing to go against our political opponents. Stop me where I'm wrong, folks, and you'll wonder why these kids are bouncing like Spalding basketballs. Give these kids a break. Let's give them some explanation. Tom and I came from a different America. We grew up, we were different little boys in a different America. And never did I ever question, until recently, the legitimacy of my government or question, did I trust it? Or the media? Guys, I go back to that word every time, keeps popping up in my conversation. The media, the media, the media. They're all agenda driven. And, you know, all of them have something positive to contribute to this conversation. In life, they say it's not what you say, but how you say it. As much as I have my concerns about the president, ridiculing him or making fun of him when he trips up in the flight of stairs going to Air Force One isn't funny. And we're supposed to be better than that. And by the way, we should be teaching our children not to do that. Any case, guys, Tom, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to wrap it today. You and I will collaborate once again with the producer and Brian and others to see where we're going to take us next. But I do want to tell you guys, we're going to have more conversations about the policies of this country, domestic and foreign. We're going to talk about this withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I'm sure we're going to have some other interesting conversations like UFOs, which is suddenly hovering around us. I don't mean no play on words, but you guys understand what I'm saying. We're starting to have conversations. And the key is not to alarm the American public, but to educate us. And by the way, would it really surprise you in a universe as mass as ours that there would be other life forms? I mean, how short-sighted could our thinking be? In any case, guys, we're going to call it a day. Tom, I thank you again. I thank the producer. I thank Brian for pulling this thing together for us. You know, this has been over 2 years that we've been doing this podcast. Initially, it was Between the Lines. I encourage you to delve into some of those prior episodes. You'll see a lot of things I spoke about 2 years ago. We're hearing about them more and more today. I do want to say this. What's going on today and questioning the credibility of the government isn't good for the country, guys. We got to stop lobbing each other's heads off and just fix this problem. You know, bring some legitimacy. Try to develop some commonality in our thinking and re-embrace this word called compromise. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Tom, thank you again. And we're going to see you next week